Before we begin, I'd like to talk a little behind the scenes. When I started this retrospective, there were a number of games in the series I haven't played, so I went back and played through them in my free time. I started with the bad ones first just to get them out of the way, and work from there. But for some reason, Portrait of Ruin was the last game I played for this retrospective. Hell, I didn't even start playing it until after I recorded voiceovers for almost half of the retrospective. When I was looking at the list of Castlevania games when this whole thing began, I completely forgot this game even existed. I knew nothing about it aside from the main characters' names, and even then, that was only because they're both playable characters in Harmony of Despair, but we'll get to that game at a later date. I don't know what it was, but this game just didn't seem to grab my interest. But finally, after playing every single other game in the series, the only one I hadn't played was this one. And after putting it off for so long, I sat down and played through the whole thing in one sitting. And after doing so, I can safely say that Castlevania Portrait of Ruin is my favorite game in the series. Wow. I missed out. I can't believe it took me this long to play this game. I loved every single moment. Everything was done so incredibly well, from the story, to the gameplay, to the characters, to the presentation. And do I even need to mention the soundtrack? Like I said, I went into this game completely blind, so imagine my surprise when I found out this game is a sequel to Castlevania Bloodlines. The game takes place during World War II, where Dracula's castle has arisen once again. Yeah, because we didn't have enough fucking problems during World War II. The game focuses on Jonathan Morris, the son of John Morris, one of the two playable characters from Bloodlines, in his quest to find out why Castlevania has arisen so soon after his father defeated Dracula. He is joined by a powerful young mage by the name of Charlotte Allin. And I love her. They meet a monk named Vincent, who is sent by the church to greet the two heroes, and tells them, hey, Dracula's castle, you might want to check that out. Our journey begins as they make their way to the castle, and immediately we learn this game's gimmick. Since we have two main characters, we have the option to switch between them, like Julius mode in Dawn of Sorrow. Or we could just play as both of them at the same time. Yeah, this game has a partner system. Jonathan and Charlotte can work together to solve certain puzzles, push certain objects, operate certain mechanisms. They even fight together against bosses, dealing even more damage to them. Think of it kind of like the system in Sonic 2, but if Tails was more useful. Not long after we trek into the castle, we meet a mysterious spirit who hides his true identity, but in the meantime goes by the name Wind. Wind informs us that this is in fact Dracula's castle, but Dracula is not the master of the castle, but instead a vampire by the name of Bronner, who, with the help of his two vampire daughters Stella and Loretta, is attempting to draw out Dracula's power and use it for himself. Since Bronner is an artiste, he does so using paintings which act as portals to various different locations, drawing out dark power from there. So now Jonathan and Charlotte have to pull a Mario 64 and go inside the paintings, complete the task and boss there, and cut off Bronner from his power. This is so fun. It's Symphony of the Night meets Sonic 2 meets Mario 64. How can I not love this? Jonathan has the vampire killer, but is unable to use it properly since he's not a Belmont. You can't use it at its full power, so instead you can use other weapons in the meantime, similar to other Metroidvania games. Charlotte, on the other hand, is your spellcaster, and she can create powerful spells that bring down even the toughest of bosses. Eventually, we encounter Death, who this time around plays a much larger role in the story. We quickly learn that Death and Bronner are not working together and actually have opposing goals, as Bronner wishes to steal Dracula's power and Death wishes to revive his master. So we will be encountering Death quite a few times throughout the story. Eventually, Jonathan and Charlotte discover a photo of Bronner's two daughters, Stella and Loretta, together with Wind. Awfully suspicious about this, the two check in with Wind to see what's going on. And here is where we learn the truth. Wind's real name is Eric Lacard, the second playable character from Castlevania Bloodlines and John Morris's best friend. I did not see this coming. Speaking of things I didn't see coming, we also learn that Stella and Loretta are not Bronner's daughters, but Eric's. Bronner, believing that these two girls were reincarnations of his daughters who passed away, brainwashed them into believing they were his daughters and turned them into vampires. Wow, this dude's fucking nuts. Naturally, Jonathan and Charlotte promise Wind that they will change the two girls back to normal. And here is where the bad ending comes into play. Eventually, you'll fight the two sisters, and if you kill them, well, you get the bad ending. What you're supposed to do is use a spell with Charlotte to change the two girls back to normal. Once you do so, they give Jonathan the opportunity to use the vampire killer at its full potential. All he has to do is prove himself to the whip by defeating a memory of the last Belmont who used it. So now we get to fight Richter! And it's so fun and very similar to his battle in Symphony of the Night, which is certainly not a bad thing. I really like this boss. After Jonathan proves himself to the whip, he can now use the vampire killer freely, and it's the most powerful weapon in the game. Our two heroes now go to confront Bronner. Upon his defeat, he starts rambling on about how he only wanted his daughters back, and you almost start to feel bad for the guy. But you don't get much of a chance as Death swoops in and kills him. With Bronner out of the way, Death is free to resurrect Dracula and goes to do just that. Now, our two heroes must go confront Dracula, and what follows is what I consider to be the best final boss in the entire series. I cannot even begin to explain how excited I was when this happened. You get to fight the two most recurring villains in the series, Death and Dracula, at the same time. It's as awesome as it is difficult, and is a fantastic endgame boss. After Jonathan and Charlotte defeat them, the castle crumbles and Eric gets to say goodbye to his daughters before his soul is finally put to rest. Castlevania Portrait of Ruin is incredible. I'm honestly kind of mad at myself that it took me this long to play it. I loved everything about this game, and I will gladly play through it over and over again. Please don't make the same mistake I did, and play this game as soon as possible. And with my favorite Castlevania game out of the way, it's time we move on to one of the stranger Castlevania games. Come back tomorrow when we talk about the cell phone exclusive Castlevania Order of Shadows. See you then.